She and the child leave my house today.
Please, don't do this. We have nowhere to go. Mom, please.
Adekunle Okafor's voice was cold and resolute, without the slightest hesitation, as he hurled Amina Okafor's suitcase into the yard. The latch burst open, clothes spilling out into the heavy rain pouring down. Amina stood frozen in the doorway, clutching Zara Okafor tightly in her arms as the child trembled with fear, pressing herself against her mother, her confused eyes unable to understand why the father who once held her every night had suddenly become so distant. But Adekunle did not look at his daughter. His gaze was icy, as if every bond had been erased. Behind him, Ngozi Balewa stepped forward, arms crossed, her eyes filled with disdain as she looked at Amina like something that had lost all value. She didn't need to say a word. Her mere presence made everything painfully clear. Adekunle stepped back to stand beside Ngozi, as if to confirm his choice, then continued speaking, each word sharp and cutting.
I am so tired of this life. I deserve something better. Not this.
Those words felt like they wiped away every memory the two of them had ever shared. Zara gently tugged at her mother's shirt, her voice trembling. Mom, where are we going? But Amina didn't answer. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She simply looked straight at the man in front of her, the man who once called her his wife, and asked a single question, her voice calm to the point of being chilling.
And what about your child?
A long silence followed, but Adekunle didn't respond. He turned his back and walked into the house, as if the question had never been asked, as if the child had never been his. The door slammed shut behind him, cutting the mother and daughter off from what they once called home. They were left standing in the rain, no shelter, no explanation. That night, Amina didn't say another word. She bent down, picking up each piece of mud-soaked clothing one by one, while still holding Zara close. Then she walked into the rain without looking back, because in that moment she understood something. Some doors, once closed, are not meant to be opened again. They are meant to force you to keep walking without them. The rain that night didn't stop as quickly as Amina Okafor had hoped, and neither did the life that began after that door closed behind her. It stretched on, cold and unrelenting, with no clear end in sight. Amina carried Zara Okafor from one street to another in the darkness. Nowhere truly welcomed them, only makeshift shelters, damp market corners, and unfamiliar eyes that looked at them as if they didn't belong. Their first night, they slept on an old wooden bench outside a closed shop. Zara curled into her mother's arms, shivering from the cold, while Amina stayed awake, eyes wide open, staring into nothingness, as if the moment she closed them, everything would completely fall apart. The next morning, when the sun rose, reality didn't soften. It only became clear. They had no home, no money, no one to return to. Amina began taking any work she could find, washing dishes, cleaning, carrying goods for others. Every coin came slowly, barely enough to buy cheap food, never enough to call it a stable life. Some days, Zara had only one meal. Some days, just water and a small piece of bread. But the child rarely complained. She simply looked at her mother, as if trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Then, one afternoon, as Amina tried to divide their small portion of food into 2 equal parts, Zara gently held her hand. Her innocent eyes, filled with quiet worry, looked up as her soft voice nearly faded into the air.
Mom, is Dad coming back?
The question froze Amina in place. Her hand stopped mid-air, not because she hadn't heard it, but because she didn't know how to answer. Deep down, she knew the truth was no. But she couldn't say that to a child who was still waiting, still believing that her father would return and hold her like before. Amina swallowed hard, reaching out to gently stroke Zara's hair, trying to keep her voice steady.
Eat, child. Everything will be all right.
But even she no longer knew what okay meant. The days that followed blurred into an endless cycle: work, exhaustion, hunger, a place to rest for the night, then waking up to repeat it all over again. There were moments when Amina stood in the middle of a crowded market, looking around and realizing no one knew who she was. No one knew she once had a family, once had a home. Now, she was just a woman trying to survive one day at a time. But what hurt her the most wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion. It was the way Zara looked at other families. Parents walking beside their children, laughter echoing in ways she once knew. And in that moment, Amina understood something clearly. She couldn't keep living like this, not for herself, but for the small hand still holding on to hers. A child who still believed that life would get better, even without knowing how. That morning, the sun had just begun to rise over the rusted rooftops of the market, its light cutting sharply across the dusty road where Amina Okafor knelt, scrubbing stains from the concrete. Her hands were red from cold water and cheap chemicals. Behind her, Zara Okafor sat curled up on a step, clutching an old cloth bag, her quiet eyes fixed on her mother, as if she had already grown used to waiting. But not everyone around them was silent. A nearby vendor glanced over and shook her head. Look at her. Leaves her husband with nothing, now she works like a servant. A man beside her let out a dry laugh.
They say it was her
She didn't
fault.
leave. She got left.
Look at her
Who would keep a
face,
woman
she
like
knows it
that?
too.
A few low chuckles followed. Not loud, but enough for Amina to hear. She heard every word. But she didn't react, because reacting meant losing the job, and losing the job meant Zara wouldn't eat. So she lowered her head even more and kept scrubbing, as if nothing had happened. But Zara's eyes had changed. The child looked toward those voices. She didn't fully understand their words, but she understood enough to know her mother was being looked down on. Then suddenly, a deep, steady voice cut through the murmurs behind them.
How long have you been doing this work?
Amina paused and turned. Standing before her was Ibrahim Musa, a man not dressed in wealth, yet carrying a presence that made the others fall silent. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the whispers. He looked only at Amina, as if she were the only person there. Amina wiped her hands, her voice cautious.
I do whatever I can, as long as it pays.
A man nearby cut in with a smirk.
You're wasting your time. She's not going to be anything more than this.
Ibrahim didn't even turn his head. His voice was calm, but firm enough to silence him instantly.
I didn't ask you.
Then he looked back at Amina, his gaze sharp, but without a trace of contempt.
If I gave you a chance, could you do more than this?
It wasn't pity. It felt like a test. Amina stood still for a few seconds. Around her, the whispers started again, some laughing, some already convinced of the answer. But she didn't look at them. She looked at Zara, then back at Ibrahim. Her voice dropped, steady, certain. I don't need it to be easy. I just need a real chance. This time, no one laughed. The way she said it made it impossible to dismiss her. Ibrahim gave a slight nod, turned to walk away, then paused and spoke without looking back. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., at my workshop. If you're late, don't come. A woman nearby muttered just loud enough to be heard. She'll quit anyway. People like her never last. But the next morning, before the sky had fully brightened, Amina was already standing in front of the workshop's iron gate. Zara was asleep on her shoulder. Her eyes were tired, but no longer empty. Ibrahim Musa stood there, watching her for a long moment before speaking.
Good, at least you didn't quit like they thought you would.
The days that followed were anything but easy. The work at the workshop was physically demanding, the discipline strict. The others looked at her with doubt. Some whispered, "She won't last." Some even laughed when her hands trembled from exhaustion. But Amina didn't react. She just worked. Worked until there was no energy left to think. Day by day, piece by piece, she proved them wrong. Not with words, but by showing up every morning, by continuing, by refusing to quit. And slowly, the laughter faded. The looks of contempt turned into silence. As for Zara, once just a small figure waiting quietly in the corner of the workshop, she began to smile again. Because for the first time in a long while, she saw that her mother was no longer just enduring. She was rising. In those early days, while Amina Okafor struggled for every meal in the old market, Adekunle Okafor's life on the other side of the city couldn't have been more different. The house he had once thrown them out of was replaced with something new, bigger, brighter, more expensive. Ngozi Balewa appeared in every corner of that life, in new dresses, at parties, at gatherings Adekunle had never been part of before. He stood among the crowd, laughing loudly, raising his glass, as if leaving his family behind had simply been a necessary step to upgrade his life. And slowly, he began to believe it himself. Whenever anyone asked about his past, he would just smirk and say,
I'm just choosing what's better for me.
He repeated that line so many times that even he no longer questioned it. Money started coming in faster. New connections opened up, and Ngozi was always there, smiling, praising him, pushing him to spend more, invest more, live bigger. She told him exactly what he wanted to hear.
You weren't made to live small like before.
And he believed her. He believed it so completely that he stopped seeing his own limits. Investments began to appear, small at first, then larger, then more reckless. A new acquaintance introduced him to an unbeatable opportunity, a project that couldn't fail, and Adekunle didn't hesitate to pour money into it. He had grown used to winning, used to everything moving upward. But what he didn't realize was that the solid foundations he once had were gone. His decisions were no longer built on stability. They were driven by blind ambition. Then, the money started getting stuck. A project stalled. An investment didn't return. And for the first time, Adekunle felt something unfamiliar, unease. But he didn't stop, because stopping meant admitting he was wrong, and that was something he had never wanted to face. Ngozi was still there, but her eyes had changed. The admiration was gone. In its place came questions, pressure, constant reminders about money. You said everything would get better, so where is it? Her voice was no longer soft, no longer supportive. It carried calculation now. Adekunle brushed it off, forcing himself to stay calm. It's just temporary. Everything will be fine. But this time, even he wasn't sure whether those words were true anymore. In the days that followed, the tension became impossible to ignore. The parties disappeared, the loud laughter faded. In their place came arguments, small at first, then growing sharper, heavier. Ngozi no longer stood behind him like before. She began to criticize, to compare, to bring up other men, more successful, wealthier, and each word struck directly at Adekunle's pride. One evening, when he returned home with a tense, worn expression, Ngozi didn't greet him. She didn't ask a single question. She just looked at him and said flatly, "You're not the man I thought you were." It wasn't loud, but it was enough to break everything. Adekunle snapped back, his voice, for the first time, no longer steady. "You're here because of me. Don't forget that." But Ngozi let out a faint, cold laugh, no warmth left in it.
No. I'm here because I thought you would become the man I needed, but now...
She didn't finish the sentence, and somehow that silence weighed more than any insult. That was the moment Adekunle began to realize something he had been avoiding. This relationship was never built on love. It was built on expectation. And once those expectations were no longer met, everything began to collapse faster than he could keep up with. His work started to unravel as well. The calls became fewer. The deals no longer felt certain. The people who once laughed and stood beside him began to distance themselves. And then, in a meeting, a former associate said it outright. "We can't continue when you no longer have control of the situation." That statement hit like a slap. Not just to his work, but to the image Adekunle had built for himself. And for the first time in a long while, he found himself sitting alone in that vast house. No music, no lights, just silence. and a hollow emptiness he couldn't explain. He looked around. Everything was still there, the house, the furniture, the clothes, but something was gone. Something he hadn't realized he'd lost until now. Stability. Peace. And something else. Something he once had, but had thrown away with his own hands. Somewhere else, Amina Okafor was still working, still moving forward, one small step at a time. And those two lives were slowly moving toward a point Adekunle had never prepared himself to face. Morning at Ibrahim Musa's workshop began like any other. The steady hum of machines filled the air, thick with the smell of oil and metal. Amina bent over her work, her movements more confident now, no longer clumsy, no longer afraid of making mistakes like in the early days. From a distance, Ibrahim watched her for a moment before stepping closer, his voice low but firm. "Redo this part." Amina paused, looked down at the piece, and noticed a small flaw, something she wouldn't have caught before. She gave a slight nod.
Yes, I understand.
No long apology, no excuses. She simply fixed it and continued working. Ibrahim observed for a few more seconds, then added, "Good. At least you're not overlooking mistakes anymore." It wasn't praise, but it was enough for Amina to understand. She was improving, and that was all she needed. Not pity, but recognition. On the other side of the workshop, a woman who had once mocked her stood watching, her voice low but audible.
She's still here? I thought she would have quit a long time ago.
Another replied quietly.
No, she's not the same anymore.
Those words no longer made Amina pause like before. She heard them, but didn't react. Because now, she wasn't working to prove anything to them. She was working to rebuild her life. At noon, Zara Okafor ran into the workshop, her old backpack hanging behind her, her face glowing with excitement.
Mama! Today my teacher said I did really well.
Amina turned, her expression softening instantly. She bent down, gently wiping the dust from Zara's cheek.
Really? You did so well.
Zara smiled, taking her mother's hand.
Later, I'll read to you every day.
Amina didn't say anything more, but this time, her smile wasn't forced. It was quiet, real, like something inside her had finally begun to settle. In the afternoon, as the workday was nearing its end, Ibrahim Musa called her over. He leaned against a table, looking directly at her, his voice unchanged, but carrying a different weight.
You've been here long enough to understand one thing. I don't keep people who refuse to move forward.
Amina stood still, not rushing to respond. Ibrahim continued.
But I don't give second chances to people who quit.
Which one do you think you are? Amina met his gaze.
I don't have the option to quit.
Ibrahim shook his head slightly.
No, everyone has a choice. They just choose what's easy.
A brief silence followed, then he spoke again.
Starting tomorrow, you won't just work. You'll learn how to manage this part.
Amina froze for a second, not out of fear, but because she understood what that meant. This was no longer just a temporary job. It was a step forward. She nodded. I can do it. Ibrahim didn't reply. He simply turned away. But this time, his look wasn't one of observation. It was confirmation. That evening, in the small room the two of them had managed to rent, Zara sat on a wooden bed, opening her notebook,
The sun
reading aloud the
shines
uneven
brightly
lines she had
on
written
the
with
little
pride.
house. Mama, later, I'll take care of you, so you won't have to work so hard anymore.
Amina sat beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke softly.
You just need to study well.
I'll take care of the rest.
I'll take care of everything else.
Zara looked at her and nodded, as if she believed it completely. And for the first time in a long while, Amina believed her own words too. Her life was still far from easy. Money still had to be counted day by day. The work was still exhausting. But one thing had changed completely. She was no longer the woman thrown out into the rain that night. She was someone standing firmly on her own feet. And somewhere else, Adekunle Okafor was beginning to realize that the things he had traded everything for, his better life, no longer felt the way they once did. But by the time he started to look back, what he had lost was no longer there to return to. 4 years didn't bring a sudden collapse. It eroded him, little by little, until one day Adekunle realized he was standing at the bottom. The parties were gone. The invitations stopped coming. His phone was silent more often than it rang. The investments, once called guaranteed wins, had turned into long stretches of red numbers. The house that once symbolized his upgraded life now felt so empty that even his footsteps echoed heavily through it. Ngozi Balewa was no longer there in the mornings. She left as cleanly as she had entered. No arguments, no explanations. Just one sentence, cold enough to sever everything.
I don't stay with someone who's going down.
And this time, Adekunle had nothing to argue with, because he knew it was true. In the days that followed, he began selling off the things he had once been proud of. First the car, then the furniture, then even the relationships, because when the money disappeared, everything else vanished faster than he had ever imagined. One afternoon, he sat alone in a nearly empty room, staring into nothingness, and for the first time in years, he didn't know what he would do tomorrow. There was no plan, no direction, just a hollow space he couldn't fill. And in that moment, a memory he had tried to bury for 4 years came back. The rain, the suitcase, the woman standing outside with the child in her arms. He closed his eyes as if he could erase it, but this time it didn't fade. It became clearer. Then a thought surfaced, small at first, but strong enough for him to hold on to. Amina Okafor. The name he hadn't spoken in years was now the only thing on his mind. Not because of love, but because of something deeper, something that felt like a last chance. So he went. No preparation, no certainty, just following the path of his own memory. The road leading to Amina's workplace felt less unfamiliar than he expected, but standing in front of the workshop gate felt completely different. He was no longer the man who walked confidently into any place. He was someone standing before a door he wasn't even sure he had the right to knock on. Inside, the machines hummed steadily. Amina Okafor stood there, no longer the woman curled in the rain years ago. Her posture was straight, her focus fixed on her work, as if her world had been rebuilt into an order he no longer belonged to. Adekunle stood still for a few seconds, then stepped inside. His footsteps weren't loud, but they were enough. Amina paused and turned. In that moment, they both recognized each other. No names needed, no confirmation. Just one look, enough to pull the entire past back into the present. But this time, Amina didn't freeze. She didn't tremble. She didn't look away. She simply looked at him, calm, steady, like she was looking at someone who no longer had any power over her. Adekunle opened his mouth, but the words didn't come easily, as if everything he wanted to say had suddenly become heavier than he expected. Finally, he stepped closer, his voice no longer carrying the certainty it once had. Amina, But Amina didn't let him finish. She cut him off, her tone even, neither raised nor lowered. Why are you here? There was no anger, no bitterness, no accusation, just a clarity that made him pause. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. I need to talk to you. Amina looked at him for a few seconds, then replied,
We had nothing left to say 4 years ago.
The answer was short, final, like a door being closed again. But this time, it was from her side. Adekunle shook his head and stepped closer, his voice more urgent now. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I've lost everything. Amina stayed silent. She didn't interrupt, didn't react. She simply listened, as if she were hearing a story that no longer belonged to her. Adekunle continued, his voice dropping, almost breaking. I thought
things would get better, but I lost. I lost you. I lost our child.
It was the first time he had mentioned Zara, not as an obligation, but as something truly gone. Amina looked at him. Her eyes were no longer completely cold, but they weren't soft either. There was only a clarity she had never had before. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate.
You didn't lose us. You chose to leave us.
That sentence left Adekunle with nothing to say. Because it was true, completely true. He stood there as if every excuse had suddenly become meaningless. A long silence stretched between them. No rain, no noise from the past, just the present, where every choice had its consequence and neither of them could go back to change it. Adekunle Okafor stood motionless in the workshop, his words falling onto the cold floor with no one to pick them up. There was nothing left to defend, nothing left to hide, only the bare truth of a man who had destroyed his own life with his own hands. And then, from the doorway, a child's voice rang out, clear, innocent, and enough to make the entire space pause. Mom,
I finished
my homework. Amina turned her head, and by instinct, Adekunle followed her gaze. A young girl stepped inside, small but composed. Her posture steady, her eyes bright. No longer the trembling child from that night in the rain. Zara Okafor stood there, older now, stronger. And in the moment their eyes met, Adekunle felt himself pulled backward in time. The image of the little girl from years ago overlapped with the one standing before him now. But this time, she didn't run to him. She didn't call him dad. She simply walked to Amina's side and gently held her mother's hand, as if it were instinct, as if her place had long been decided. Beside her mother, not beside the man in front of her. Adekunle took a step forward, his voice trembling for the first time. Zara. But she didn't respond. She looked at him, not with fear, not with love, but with a distance he couldn't bear. In that look was what truly broke him. Not the loss of money, not being abandoned, but standing in front of his own child and realizing she no longer belonged to him. He lowered himself slightly, as if he no longer had the strength to stand straight. His voice cracked.
You've grown so much.
Zara said nothing. Her hand tightened around Amina's just a little more, as if to confirm where she belonged. And in that moment, everything inside Adekunle collapsed completely. No pride, no ego, no excuses left. He took another step forward, then stopped. His eyes shifted to Amina, and this time, he was no longer the man from 4 years ago. He was someone who had lost everything. His voice dropped, almost pleading.
Amina, please. Give me one chance.
The words fell into the space. No one answered right away. No noise, no drama, just a heavy silence. Amina looked at him, not for long, not avoiding him either. There was no pain left in her eyes, but there was no place for him in them anymore. She took a quiet breath, then spoke, slowly, clearly, each word carefully measured. The day you threw us out? Adekunle didn't lift his head, but every word reached him more clearly than anything else ever had.
The day you sent us away.
Zara's fingers tightened slightly around her mother's hand, as if she understood this moment mattered, that something was being said that could never be taken back.
You lost your family.
The words weren't loud or harsh, but they were enough to end everything that remained.
You lost your family.
Because he knew there was nothing left to say. No words could change it. He lowered his head, not out of force, but because there was no other way. Amina didn't step forward or turn away immediately. She stood there for a brief second, as if confirming that everything had truly ended. Then she took Zara's hand and walked away, steady, without hesitation. Zara followed, not looking back. There was no rain this time, no door slamming shut, just 2 sets of footsteps fading into silence. And that silence was heavier than anything else, because it was no longer abandonment. It was a choice. And this time, the one left behind was Adekunle Okafor, standing alone, facing the consequences of the decision he once believed was right. Thank you for staying until the end of the story. If it meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel.